And so I am again honored to be able to interview you. And I will ask all of our audience participants if they would like to put in their questions in the chat, feel free to do so. We have some questions from the committee that will get started, and then I hope to make this a very meaningful, engaging discussion where we're all learning from one another and Dr. Rossley. So let's start off with our first set of questions that I have as the audience is building their questions. So as the first African-American woman to serve as a dean of a US medical school, we are sure that you were the first in many spaces. What challenges have you faced in your career that you believe may have resulted from discrimination as a woman or a person of color? And how did you overcome those challenges?
It's interesting because I predated efforts like diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was really out there by myself. And so whenever I was introduced to a new environment or a new group, I became the token, you know? I was fulfilling some quota. And it doesn't take long to understand that being a token or quota clearly says that they don't have high expectations for you. You're just filling a space. And so immediately I said, well, hey, personally, I'm going to prove them wrong. You know, I can give you many examples of things that I have done that were not the perfections I would have liked. And then to have a faculty person walk up to me and say, boy, you are really wonderful, when I know that I could do better. And so what I developed over time throughout the entire continuum of education is I set my own standards for excellence because I could not rely on the environment around me to give me objective feedback. Their feedback was always tainted by or touched by their expectations of me as a female and as a minority. So I could go, each step of the way, I have examples that I could talk about. I didn't get my pediatric residency because that I wanted because I was told that, you know, I was taking a man's position. And I probably wasn't going to practice anyway. I was going to probably leave medicine and have babies. And let me tell you, there was no cloaking that discussion. That is exactly what was said because that was the culture of the time, you know. And when I received the chair position at Michigan State University, they contacted me. I was in practice and had served as a very popular clinical preceptor. And I was contacted to see if I would be interested in the position. So I thought, what the heck, I'll interview. This is my alma mater. But I talked to the director of the search committee and said, look, I don't want to come up there if you're just looking for a quota. You know, because I fill 2 quotas. I'm female and I'm Black. So I don't want to come up there just for quotas. So you need to find out from the powers that be at that institution whether or not they see me as really being competitive for that position. A couple of days later, he called back and he said, I spoke to the powers, you know, and they said absolutely positively that you are qualified and they would like for you to come up and interview. So on interview day, I'm already set to go. And my first meeting is with the dean of the college. And I sit down with him. He was my dean. And I said, you know me as a student. This is a quote. Is this a job that I can do? And he said, no, you can't do this job. And I said, but you do realize that this was the question I asked before I even applied. He said, yeah, but it was okay. I thought you'd have fun doing it. Right? No, I was stuck with the dilemma of, I had a whole schedule, a lot of people to meet. Do I just get up and walk out and have all these people not know why I'm here? Or do I stay and go through the process? So I decided to stay and go through the process based on sticking it out no matter. The provost of the institution directed that they had to offer me the position, and they couldn't offer it to anyone else until or unless I turned the position down. So then I was invited back to campus to talk about other positions that I might like at the university, in order and so that they would not have to give me the chairperson of the department position. And I can remember saying, I wasn't looking for a job. I have a private practice that I love. I don't need you to give me a job. I applied for a particular position, and if you all don't want to extend that position to me, I'm okay with that because I can go home. That was one of the pivotal experiences in my academic administration career, because I remembered what that was like, and I finally fully understood the academic environment as to not just the microaggressions, but the purposeful use and abuse, quite frankly, under the guise of promoting something that you have no desire to promote, hence building consensus. So we all know what we're talking about. Okay. So that's my short answer. I could go through 10, 15 more. That's my short answer.
Thank you for that. And we are all glad that you stuck it out and you proved them wrong. I share with the audience that I'm sure many of us have had that occasion where we were taken for granted. And sometimes it's those moments we're taken for granted that we shine the most. So thank you for that. So I'm going to move on to our next question. And I see that there are some questions coming from the audience in the chat. I again encourage everyone to put their questions in the chat. We will get to them momentarily. How do you believe institutions, colleges of medicine, or residency training programs can foster the creation of inclusive learning environments where everyone feels comfortable to practice and train?
I think it's to use words that are overused and kind of lose their meaning, but I want to emphasize them. It's through value and respect for the trainees and for the patient. Value. If you feel that this individual has value, it kind of changes the environment, because, as the prior speaker was saying, because it emphasizes and it creates a positive engagement because you value. One of the things that I have always done as part of my administrative style is to separate the personal from the professional. And in the academic environment, it's professional, it's not personal. It's not about whether you like somebody or don't like them. It's about the value they bring to the setting. And that's a professional perspective. Now, I can tell you, none of us are perfect, and I've made mistakes, but fundamentally, I'm hoping that the mistakes that I've made, I've learned lessons from. And I have tried over and over again. When I'm reacting to something, I try to figure out why I'm reacting, so that that reaction will be professional, from a professional perspective, and not from a personal perspective. So I've learned lessons over time, and I sometimes share some of those lessons. My daughter tells me I need to write a book, but I do share the lessons that I've learned. But we need, for an inclusive environment, you have to have respect and value for all the members of that environment. And you can have no tolerance for bias by anybody in that environment. And let me tell you, one of the ways that people let you know or inform you of their bias is they will walk up to you and say, "Can I tell you a joke?" My answer to that usually is no, because think about all the jokes you've heard. They are not positive ways in which to bring people together. Actually, from a social cultural perspective, they divide us, because that's what the joke is. So yes, an inclusive environment must value all of the participants, must respect all of the participants, and must treat everyone with a level of dignity that's appropriate for a profession.
Thank you for that. So as we move along, and we're talking about systems now, right? So we talk about the individual and what they can do, what the institutions and training programs can do. And I want to take an even bigger picture view of how we can make our medical system better and improve. What systemic structures in academic medical centers do you believe have most perpetuated the isms? So racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, microaggressions, etc.
Fundamentally, we acculturate our physician workforce to always be competitive, even when competition has no value to the system. We do that in our admissions process, and it's carried forward. I can't tell you how many times I've heard a professor say, "You got to know this for the exam." Now, you need to know this for that patient who will trust and depend upon you in the future, not for the exam. So we acculturate our students in a way, our students, residents, in a way that defeats our purpose. It creates challenges that undermine the efforts of value and respect for everybody that's a part of that workforce. And the entire medical system is very hierarchical. So you feel like you've got to please the person on top versus focusing on the end goal, which is to be able to take care of people, to be able to take care of that person who's in front of you and provide them the value and dignity that you needed to have as a student going through the process. The other thing is we have an apprenticeship model, and there are plenty of opportunities for that model to be not as good as it should be, and in some cases even abused. It's amazing to me over the last year how many calls I have received from students who have been mistreated, and residents who've been mistreated in the clinical environment. And there are no options for them. Where do they go other than filing a legal suit? There has to be some way that behaviors in our hierarchical system are monitored and addressed. And let's see. Oh, no joke. That's my last comment. No joke.
Thank you. And I think this is almost piggybacking off my question is a question from the comments. Considering this most recent wave of pushback on diversity and the claims of reverse discrimination, do you see this affecting our medical institutions, and how do we keep moving forward?
We have to keep moving forward by documenting the need and the why. Okay? We have to get to the high ground and stay focused on what it is that that diversity accomplishes for all of us. We have to, and not feel that we have to address these issues at the bottom, because that's not what this is about. This is about the health of the American population, a population that's becoming more diverse every single day. And as Americans, we have a responsibility, and as physicians, we have a responsibility to address the health issues and to address it with the strategies that will make it better. And that's how we have to stay focused. So don't retreat to having to answer or defend against those questions, okay? What we have to do is to show, to publish, to make visible what this does for the health of population, you know, which goes back to those early steps. We've got to identify the impact of diversity and the excellence that it produces for everybody.
I think that's absolutely, very salient point. And it brings us back to, some of the comments made earlier that it's not about us, right? It's not even, in some part it's about our learner, but even more important, it's about the patients. And that leads me to the next question. As we look towards our patients, particularly our patients here in Central Brooklyn, who are diverse, both in ethnic background and socioeconomics. Many of our patients are coming from immigrant families. They are a historically excluded patient population. What should we remember in our practice? How do we focus on equitable care?
It gets back to simple things. It's not what you say, it's what you do. You can say that you're looking out for every patient, but what you do is what shows. So you have to be transparent, okay? And you don't make exceptions. Ultimately, we can't have favorites. Ultimately, we have to stay focused on that. Or my daughter is an OB-GYN physician, and she used to bemoan all these patients that she had to see every day. And I reminded her, the only patient you have is the one that's in front of you. And that's the one that demands the best of you. And then when you go to the next room, the only patient you have is that patient in front of you. And that's the one that demands the best of you. Okay. We talk about patients trusting physicians, but physicians and healthcare professionals have to be trustworthy. The patient has to know that when you're there with them, you're only interested in them and their health. That builds trust. Oh, and one of the other things I'd like to add to that is we want to model. If we're talking about role models. As females, by the way, we have a tendency to want to own the problems that we see. We have to learn how to let the perpetrators own the problem. And you can do that with language. I'll help you, but I can't do it for you, okay? And that occurs in many of the settings that we're involved in, particularly when you're dealing with patients.
I think that's a perfect takeaway point, Fantastic. And again, I'll ask the audience, I am looking at the chat box to make sure I catch everyone's comments. So speaking of being a woman in a leadership position, and you've done very successful in your career, and many of us, particularly on the planning committee, we look to you. A question came from our committee in that they said, women in leadership positions are often criticized and even penalized for demonstrating some of the very same qualities for which their male counterparts are rewarded. Have you ever experienced this? And what has been your recipe for balancing compassion and credibility in your many leadership roles?
Well, number one, being female and a minority, I could not lead like a man anyway, or certainly not like a white male, period. So I had to develop my own style, you know? And so I couldn't be, and part of my style was to be as inclusive as possible. Now, that doesn't mean that I wasn't criticized, but fundamentally, I wasn't criticized because I didn't do it the way somebody else did it. I moved the ball so that the criticism had to do with the effort and not with how I was trying to structure that effort, you know? Okay. So I always had defenders because they had already made the commitment. Yeah. I've read many leadership books, and I can tell you they don't work for me. Part of what I had to be was neutral. Okay, I didn't go into a situation with an opinion already. I had to develop an entirely different style. I had to use a different language. Okay, I would never raise my voice or put my finger in somebody's face. Never. It doesn't work for me. And so to that extent, in the environments where I was and where I have been, I was unpredictable. They didn't know my buttons. They didn't know what to push, you know? And so therefore, and I took pride on that because since I was unpredictable, that ultimately they had to engage with me differently because they didn't know where I was coming from. And one of the simplest examples is, and it's interesting to me, I would have people come to my office and ask my admin, what kind of mood is she in today? Right? I don't have moods. I just don't. That's not how I engage. I do not have moods, you know? I learn to compartmentalize the issues so they don't rain over on each other. So, yeah, I had to develop a different style. And I can say, I don't remember everybody criticizing me for doing something the way that, you know, maybe my male colleagues have done it. I will tell you what they have done, though. They'll say, well, I don't like what she's doing because that's not how such and such did it. It hits in the reverse.
That's amazing. And I'm sure I can share with my colleagues in saying, we cannot wait to read that book of yours.
I have about 100 lessons that I've learned.
Yes, and you would definitely share it with the world. So we're looking forward to that eventually. And another question on generations, right? So if we look at our learning environment now, we have about 5 generations that are in our clinical learning environments. And so when you have this intergenerational mix, what can happen is the definition of professionalism changes, right? So what I think is professional versus what my learners might think is professional may be different. And some of this is because there's an evolution related to further advancement of those who are historically excluded or women. But how do we modernize the view for all of us such that we all share the same perspective on what's professional? How do we set the expectation that everyone shares the same definition of professionalism?
Yeah, that's interesting because professionalism often is a behavioral reflection as well. And it gets into the personal, you know, who you like, who you don't like, whatever. This was the most provocative question that you sent to me. I think we get to the high ground on this. Professionalism should indeed be based upon what society expects of physicians, and that needs to be the model. Now, it doesn't need to have the minutia attached to it, but what does the population that's being served, what do they expect of their physicians? And we've had some indications of that nationally, where it's sort of like with the ACA, the statement was you could keep your physician, okay? But then it turned out that was not quite how the ACA was structured. And it created just a groundswell of people say, hey, I want to keep my physician, but I don't want to have to take another physician. Well, part of that is this discussion of what they are expecting professionally from physicians. And that's where we have to go. We have to get to the high ground to determine what does the population expect of their physicians, and then fine tune it to fit the environments that we're in. And that's not a generational issue. Although in all honesty, our populations are generational at the same time. But I think that healthcare is a basic human need, and that generationally or not, we all expect that if we are investing in these physicians, that they can deliver on that need with some professional guidelines that are available to all of us. So I think we have to get on the high ground. What does the patient population, what does the American population expect as for a physician professional? And then take that piece down. That becomes the core that we can add stuff to based on where we are and the institutions and the populations we serve.
Thank you very much. Again, I think that's resonating and saying it's not about us as the physicians, right? It's about our patients and what our patients expect, because that's what we're here for, right? Is for the patients. And sometimes that gets lost in trying to get promoted and to publish and to do research and to be a leader. We forget that we're all here for the patients and to care for the patients.
Or as I sometimes say, the process becomes the enemy of the outcome. And that we have to guard against.
Exactly.
We have as professionals.
Exactly. And so my final question to you is, as we are building these diverse workforce, what can we do to break down the social cultural divide such that no one has advantage or disadvantage in a professional advancement based on any characteristic other than the quality of their work? So that it's not, she has done a wonderful job to be a woman, to be a Black woman. Wow, you speak very articulate for a Black woman. There's always that implication, right? When can you see that, you were an excellent dean, not just acknowledging that you were the first African-American woman to serve as a dean, but acknowledging the merits of what you did in your career? What can we do to get to that, to me, ultimate stage of inclusivity and diversity, where it's ubiquitous?
I would like to get to that point where it's ubiquitous, but I'm not sure we're close enough yet. That gets back to the issue of, and this is what I had to develop, and I would suggest that other people look at it that way as well. Those situations try to make you a victim, okay? Don't let the perpetrator own the problem, okay? But as far as opportunities have to be much more equitable. One of the lessons I learned is success is a measure of opportunity, not worth. And fundamentally, we have to create equitable opportunities, which means that from my perspective, and I've had this discussion and I'm using it with the deans in the colleges of osteopathic medicine right now, is all students can apply for this, because if they are a student, they are qualified. And so therefore, and here are the criteria that you need to apply, but all students can apply. And then do a lottery. So it doesn't become an unconscious and systemic process of life, you know, and nobody can claim it's a lottery. But you have to make the opportunities available to everybody. And having said that, women and minorities have to take advantage of those opportunities when they come along. Okay? They have to be encouraged and mentored to take advantage of every opportunity that comes along.
Absolutely true. Well, it's been delightful to interview you, a true honor, and to learn from you this evening. And we want to once again thank you for joining us today. I also just want to thank everyone for their continued participation. We see that we have stayed over 100 participants strong all day long, so that is fantastic. I think that we have learned from one another. Some of the great points that we've learned today is to humble ourselves. That we're all a work in progress, to give ourselves grace, to give each other grace as we stumble along this way and try to find ourselves within our own career paths. We have to acknowledge when we make mistakes and to try to do better. And thank you so much, Dr. Rossley, for sharing your time and your message with us. It's a true inspiration, as I can see many people in the chat comments are saying how inspiring you are, and how we've all learned from your career. And so we thank you. So this is.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.